Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome back to I Hate Rock Music. And today I'm going to cover another crazy, heavy German band called SILBERBART. And great album cover. This is the CD version. I don't own the record. It's pretty expensive. But incredible band. And even amongst all these insane, crazy German heavy underground bands, SILBERBART really takes the cake. Completely over the top. It's Hajo Teschner on guitar and vocals, Peter Behrens on drums, and Werner Klug on bass. And they released one album in 1971 called Four Times Raising, which actually came out on a major label, Philips. And one of the interesting things, of course, is that Hajo Teschner used to be in a total German pop band called the Tonics. And I'll put a link to this album below, but they put out an album called Bubblegum Music in 1969 and actually had a number of hits. And they basically were responding to all the bubblegum hits like the 1910 Fruit Gum Company and the Ohio Express in the US. And they even did a number of covers of those bands. So complete fluff pop. So to imagine that Hajo Teschner evolved out of the Tonics and then ended up in a band like SILBERBART is pretty crazy. But I'm sure there's a lot of bands and musicians making that transition from pop bands to heavy bands. We've seen that happen multitudes of times, but not near as shocking as this. But as it turns out, Hajo Teschner had some background. He was in a group called Die Shocker that never released anything. And but that said, he was already interested in a lot of noise and the possibilities of guitar, and played with drummers that used riveted cymbals and junk percussion and things like that. So he already had an interest in that. So it's kind of surprising that he ever was in a pop band. But he was in the Tonics. They broke up. Then he went back to his hometown in Germany and formed SILBERBART. As it turns out, SILBERBART never really got too far from their hometown. They played a lot of local shows and opened for a few big German bands like Eloy, and had quite the reputation for just being devastating live. And I could imagine with this record, they must have just been insane live. I'd hate to be a band that followed them playing. But they ended up recording this record. They recorded it in a month between April and May of 1971 on a 4-track. And they considered them demos, but somehow Philips ended up releasing the record, and I can't imagine it sold very well. And they hung around till 1972 and then broke up. So we have 4 songs, a little over 30 minutes of music, and yet they're total legends. And one look at the song titles, I mean, tells you the first song, Chub Chub Cherry, is probably the most conventional of what they did, with heavy riffing and over the top vocals. But then they get into the crazy shit. 16 minutes of Brain Brain, 10 minutes of a song called God, and then 12 minutes of a song called Head Tear Off the Drunken Sun. And they are just about as extreme as they get. The first song, as I mentioned, is for them conventional, but it's certainly not conventional by anybody else's standards. But by the time they get to Brain Brain in 16 minutes, it starts off with kind of a doomy, quiet part, and then they unleash a wall of noise, and the singer just shrieking over the top. So you kind of know you're descending into the depths of the abyss, and they don't disappoint. The tune keeps morphing and evolving, every excuse to unleash a brand new set of heavy riffs, and then sections of just the joy of complete guitar noise. And the bass player is obviously into it too, because he makes a lot of racket on bass too, a lot of string scraping and tapping and just pure noise. And so there's literally a couple of minutes of that in that second song, and it just doesn't let up from there. There's sections of these tunes that are punctuated by these over-the-top vocals and a lot of caterwauling, and then every excuse to unleash some pretty brutal leads. And so there are sections where they're kind of reminiscent of other power trios, but there really is no other power trio quite like this. The only thing I can compare them to is maybe the first Blue Cheer album, but if Blue Cheer had a lot more complex and convoluted arrangements, you'd have some kind of idea of the brutality and weirdness of Silberbart. And the last song is has a lot of the same elements, just morphs and evolves every excuse to do variations on the just total heavy riffage, just some incredible sounds. If you like just really over the top early 70s style guitar work, this is the album for you. It's a little oblique and a little weird and totally damaged, so people who have taste for something a little more conventional might not enjoy this record as much. But if you like total freaks, total damage freaks, total pot smoke permeating the air when you listen to the record and hearing every kind of variation on heavy riffage with leads and tons of noise. The noise quotient is really prominent in a couple of these tracks, and it's something you don't hear from a lot of heavy bands. So they're definitely one of the wildest of all the German bands. And as I mentioned in a previous video about Harry Chapter, there's a lot of great German heavy bands, big bands like Scorpions and Lucifer's Friend, who had a lot of commercial success, kind of are the tip of the iceberg. But when you dig underground German hard rock, and you find bands like Silberbart and Blackwater Park and Night Sun and Harry Chapter, you're getting into some pretty crazy stuff. It's also kind of nice that all the bands I mentioned, including Silberbart, sing in English, but it's pretty broken English, but it doesn't have to be that great with such simple lyrics. And the lyrics on the Silberbart record are just as damaged as the music, so you really get it all. It's unfortunate that we only have the one record. It's unfortunate that we only have the 4 songs. It's really unfortunate that we didn't get to hear a full-on recording of them on 8-track or 16-track recording, or even a second album, because you can tell from just this record, given the opportunity to be recorded properly and do some overdubs, they would have created something just monstrous. And so, as so often, I lament the possibilities of what could have been. But I'll put some links below. I'll put the Tonics record on there too, so you can see the radical transition. But holy shit, Silberbart are just fucked up and loud and noisy, and I can only imagine what their live experience was about. So check them out. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching I Hate Rock Music.